The shuttle's landing struts groaned against the dense underbrush as it settled on the steaming jungle floor. Outside, Tartarus greeted its visitors not with open skies, but with a dense canopy so thick it swallowed the sunlight. Captain Miraval stood at the open ramp, arms crossed, watching the mist curl like smoke between the trees. "Lovely place," she muttered. "Smells like wet gym socks and something that wants to eat us." Behind her, Juno Gadget, Reyes adjusted a sensor drone with one hand and wiped sweat from her forehead with the other. "That's just the ammonia-rich atmosphere interacting with local fungal spores. Entirely normal." "Normal?" echoed Zeke Malone, dragging a weapons crate down the ramp with exaggerated effort. "That's what she says every time we land somewhere with more teeth than trees. You sure we weren't dropped off in hell by mistake?" "Technically, Tartarus was hell," said Eli Thorne, descending last with careful step and a canvas satchel slung over his shoulder. "In myth, at least, an underworld for the worst souls. Fitting, don't you think?" "Only if you're planning to stay," Mira replied. They stepped beyond the perimeter beacon and into heat thick enough to chew. Tartarus pulsed with unseen life. Something distant screeched, a sound that didn't belong to any catalog fauna. The jungle didn't just breathe. It watched. The forward operating base was little more than reinforced fencing, a comms relay, and a crumbling supply hut patched with thermal blankets. Scorch marks along the gate suggested previous tenants hadn't stayed long, or left by choice. A chittering voice came through the comms. "Human team, this is Liaison Vale of the Galactic Concord. Please confirm status." Mira keyed her mic. "This is Captain Miravos of the Dauntless. Team is on the ground, perimeter secure, beginning environmental analysis and species mapping. Proceed with caution. This moon is rated Deltarisis. The local apexes exhibit pattern-based pack behavior, tool use, and predatory intelligence." Zeke snorted. "Tool use? Like, pass me the wrench. We're fixing to kill some tourist tool use." Eli answered without looking up from his tablet. "There's a theory some species use bone shards as decoys, or perhaps as offerings. Depends on the predator." Mira held up a hand, quieting them. "Let's not test the local culture just yet. Reyes, deploy sensors. Thorne, give me a read on native vocalizations. Zeke, watch the tree line. And stop naming things before we've seen them." Too late. Zeke already scribbled snarlbark on his gauntlet screen and circled a bush that rustled with something large and possibly annoyed. They worked in tense silence for half an hour until the first sign of non-human intelligence made itself known. A shadow moved where light should have filtered through. Mira spun, weapon raised. It stepped into view slowly, silently. 7 feet tall, quadrupedal, with a thick, iridescent hide that shimmered between copper and pitch. Its eyes glowed amber. No pupils. No fear. The Varkan. Eli raised a hand in stunned reverence. "That's not just a predator. That's a high-tier cognitive species. Look at the spatial posture. Deliberate. Non-aggressive. Maybe even curious." Zeke muttered. "That's the same look my ex gave me before she keyed my ride." "Hold fire," Mira ordered, her voice low but firm. "Let it come." The Varkan stopped a meter from Eli, lowered its head, and sniffed. A slow blink. Then it sat. Everyone froze. Eli, heart hammering, reached into a satchel and pulled out a dried fruit bar. He extended it. The Varkan took it delicately in its front jaws, retreated 2 steps, and crunched with a sound like breaking ribs. Zeke leaned over to Mira. "So we're feeding it?" "It didn't attack," Eli said. "It evaluated us. Chose not to see us as prey. That's something." Mira didn't lower her weapon. "Or it's fattening us up. Either way," Gadget chimed in, "it just tagged our drone with a scent marker. I think we're being tracked. But not hunted. More like followed." The Varkan didn't leave. It stalked the perimeter, circling but never charging. At dusk, it lay just outside the sensor net, watching them with predators' patience. That night, as the humans took shifts, the jungle buzzed with unspoken tension. Predators don't wait unless they're calculating. In the dim glow of the camp's interior, Mira reviewed the day's footage. The way the Varkan moved, slow, observant, unflinching. It didn't act like a mindless killer. It acted like it was waiting to be understood. She glanced toward Eli, who was sketching the creature with a near-religious focus. "They've sent us into the jaws of something smarter than us," she said softly. "Not smarter," Eli replied, not looking up. "Just older. We don't survive by being the strongest, Captain. We survive by refusing to be predictable. That might be enough." Outside, the Varkin lifted its head toward the moonlight and let out a low, rumbling call. Another answered from deep within the jungle. Dawn broke over Tartarus like the slow crack of a whip. Light filtered through the jungle canopy in thin beams that barely touched the ground before being swallowed by the oppressive humidity. Mira stood outside the tent, scanning the horizon, where the mist hung like a veil, shifting with each subtle movement of the trees. "They're still out there." Zeke's voice came from behind her. He adjusted his laser rifle, checking the chamber before slinging it back over his shoulder. Mira didn't turn, still watching. Juno, crouched over a terminal nearby, was tapping away at a broken piece of alien tech she'd scavenged. The predators are circling. It's like they know we're different. Not quite prey, but not quite a threat either. She paused, pulling up a 3D map of their surroundings. "And they're learning. They're not hunting us. Not yet." Eli interjected, his voice unusually quiet. He was kneeling by a makeshift lab, running analysis on the dried fruit bar he had offered the Varkin the day before. "I think they're testing us, trying to understand us, the way we tested them." Zeke snorted, wiping his face with his sleeve. "If that's true, I'm about to make a lot of new friends, or get eaten trying." "I don't think they'll eat us," Mira said, turning away from the mist to face the crew. "But they could if we don't get this under control. That thing," she gestured toward the trilene, "it's not a lone predator. It's a leader, and if it calls for reinforcements, we'll be buried in a whole new problem." Eli looked up, eyes alight with a mixture of concern and excitement. "Maybe we don't need to control them. What if we work with them?" The Varkin showed intelligence. They might recognize an ally, not just a food source. We're not like the other species they've encountered. We adapt. Maybe they'll adapt with us. Zeke raised an eyebrow. Or they'll decide we're too weird and make us their new chew toy. Mira frowned. "I'm not betting our lives on good intentions. We need a plan." Juno stood up, brushing dirt off her pants. "Actually, I think I've got something that could work." She turned to the crew, holding up a small, modified drone. It had no weapons, only an assortment of lights and whirling sensors. "I'll deploy a couple of these. They'll act as distractions, give us an edge. But we'll need bait." Zeke's eyes lit up. "You're saying we lure them in? With food?" "Oh, I'm in." He looked at the others. "We could feed them until they're so fat they can't run away fast enough to catch us." "Not food," Juno corrected. The Varkin seemed to be territorial. "We'll use the drone's noise patterns to attract them. If we can get them close enough without triggering their predatory instincts, we'll be able to observe them more closely, learn their behavior. And maybe, just maybe, they'll start following you as like a pack of loyal dogs. Or they'll rip us apart," Zeke muttered, but his tone was more amused than worried. Mira crossed her arms, still unsure but intrigued. "How are we supposed to communicate with them?" "So far, we've just been offering snacks." Eli stood up, brushing dirt from his knees. "It's not about communication in the way you think. It's about offering a non-threatening presence. We've got time to observe before they get too aggressive. We make our presence known without overwhelming them." He gave a slow smile. "I'll take the first shift. Let's see how they react to a human that's not afraid." Zeke chuckled, clapping Eli on the back. "You're braver than I am, Doc." "I'm just curious," Eli said. His voice dropped, as if the weight of the words mattered more than he let on. Mira studied him for a moment. Eli Thorne was an enigma, always willing to dive headfirst into things, but with underlying empathy that balances boldness. He wasn't just playing scientist. He wanted to understand everything around him, from alien biology to the minds of apex predators. That curiosity, however, could get them all killed. "All right," Mira said, breaking the silence. We'll try it your way. But I'm not losing any of you to a giant lizard, understood? Understood, Eli replied, already moving toward the jungle's edge with nothing more than a sensor array and a tablet in hand. Zeke grinned. Look at him, acting all brave and mysterious. It's like he's trying to impress us. Eli didn't respond, but his stride didn't falter. The Varkin appeared again around noon. Its amber eyes blinked lazily, observing Eli from a distance. The rest of the pack, 2 more Varkun, smaller but just as deadly looking, remained hidden in the foliage, only their shadows shifting among the trees. Eli didn't approach them directly. He stopped, holding out a small transmitter he had calibrated earlier. A whirring sound echoed across the clearing as the drone came to life, buzzing faintly as it deployed. The drone signal wasn't quite a threat, but it was loud enough to draw attention. The Varkun's eyes snapped to the sound, and the closest one took a cautious step forward. Miro watched from the safety of the base, gripping her rifle. Juno was tracking the drones and adjusting their frequencies. The first Varkin stopped just out of arm's reach, observing Eli. It cocked its head, as if trying to piece together his presence in its environment. Eli didn't flinch. He stood still, allowing the creature to come closer, his body language open but non-threatening. He held his hand out, palm down, fingers splayed. "Come on," he muttered to himself, the only thing more audible than the soft whirring of the drone. "Trust me." The creature stepped forward again, its massive paws silent on the jungle floor. Then, with a sudden snap, it darted toward him. Eli's breath caught, but he didn't move. The Varkin paused just a fraction of an inch from his face. Its hot breath tickled his skin. Then, in one smooth motion, it lowered its head and gently nudged aside his hand, as if testing the texture of his skin. A low hum of surprise rippled through the team's comms. "I think we just made a new friend," Eli said, his voice quiet but steady. Zeke's voice crackled in the comms. "Or it's making us into its next snack." Eli grinned, slowly lowering his hand. "Let's hope not." The next few days on Tartarus blurred between cautious exploration and the constant hum of adrenaline. The Varkun and their pack, which Eli had affectionately dubbed the Watchers, didn't pose a direct threat anymore. At least, not the way traditional predators would. Instead, they followed the humans at a distance, their amber eyes never straying too far from the group. It was as if the creatures were trying to decode a puzzle that didn't make sense. Eli had made it his personal mission to understand them, each of their movements, their communication, their intricate mannerisms. But it was clear that their behavior wasn't just based on hunger or territorial instinct. There was an underlying intelligence, something calculated. They were studying the humans, just as the humans were studying them. Myra's patience wore thin after the 4th consecutive night spent huddled in the camp, watching the creatures circle like sentient shadows. She crossed her arms, her gaze never wavering from the jungle perimeter. "They're playing with us," she muttered, not looking at Eli. "This is a waiting game. We're bait, and they're taking their sweet time deciding when we're worth the kill." Eli shook his head, the sharp click of his tablet keys a quiet protest against her theory. "No, it's more than that. They're adapting, watching us, trying to learn." He stood up from his makeshift workstation. "With the anomaly here, they've never encountered anything quite like humans. And you think that's a good thing?" Zeke's voice came from across the camp. He was sharpening his weapon, the rhythmic scrape against the stone a constant sound that put Miro on edge. "It's not that I think it's a good thing," Eli replied. "It's that I'm hoping it's a good thing. If we can show them we're not a threat, maybe we can work with them." Myra's gaze flicked between Eli and the jungle. "You're not planning on befriending them, are you?" "I'm planning on surviving," Eli answered, but there was a gleam in his eyes. His belief in human adaptability was unwavering, even in the face of overwhelming odds. "I'm going to keep trying until they understand. Just like us, they have their own way of surviving. We just need to find the right approach." "You're talking about living with them," Zeke said, the skepticism in his tone impossible to ignore. "What's next?" "We start domesticating them." Before Eli could respond, the sound of a deep, guttural growl came from the trees. Myra's instincts kicked in immediately, weapons ready. But no attack came. Instead, the Varkin appeared at the edge of the clearing, its massive form silhouetted against the mist. It took several cautious steps forward, its amber eyes fixed on Eli as it moved closer. Eli stood still, his hand extended in the same open, unthreatening gesture. For a long moment, the creature simply stared, its jaw twitching as if debating the decision. Then it did something unexpected. It lowered its head to the ground, dragging its long, sinuous neck in a manner that almost seemed like a bow. A gesture of respect, perhaps? Myra's heart skipped a beat. What the hell is that? Eli stepped forward slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. I think it's accepting us. The rest of the pack emerged from the shadows, each of the Varkun pausing to observe the scene. The silence was thick with uncertainty as they watched Eli cautiously lower his hand to the ground, palm up, finger splayed. We're learning from each other, Eli murmured. They're testing us, seeing how we react. They've never seen anything like us. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet shook, a low tremor that reverberated through the earth. Myra's hand flew to her weapon. Another quake? Juno asked, looking up from the console she had been fiddling with. No, Mira said sharply. That's not a quake. It's something big. From the depths of the jungle, something much larger stirred. The Varkun reacted immediately, retreating into the shadows, their eyes flashing with wariness. The hair on the back of Myra's neck stood on end as a massive form emerged from the trees. A creature the size of a small building, its dark scales glistening like obsidian, with jagged spines that lined its back. It was a predator, one that made the Varkun look like children in comparison. It lumbered forward, eyes gleaming with malice. Shit. Zeke's voice was filled with awe and fear. What the hell is that? Eli's voice was tight as he stepped back, his earlier optimism replaced with grim reality. That's the apex. The real apex. Mira didn't hesitate. She drew her weapon, moving into position beside Zeke, her eyes scanning for the best tactical advantage. We can't fight that thing. We need to get to the shuttle now. But the Varkun weren't retreating. They were circling, surrounding the massive predator, blocking its path as if in defiance. The great creature roared, a sound so powerful it rattled the bones. But the Varkun didn't flinch. They're protecting us, Eli said, his voice full of disbelief. They're protecting us from their own kind. Mira blinked, still processing the scene unfolding before her. The Varkun didn't charge. They didn't run. They stood their ground, using their size and cunning to slow the predator's approach, even as it lashed out with fury. Eli's voice broke through the chaos. We need to help them. We need to show them that we're in this together. No, Mira said firmly. We need to get out of here before this turns into a slaughter. But it was already too late. The Varkun launched a coordinated strike, distracting the massive predator with swift, brutal efficiency. A few of them went down, but the creature was slowing. Mira made a snap decision. Reyes, prepare the shuttle. We're getting out, but we're not leaving them behind. The Varkun, despite their intelligence and strength, were no match for the predator. But as the humans backed away toward the shuttle, it became clear that the bond they formed, however fragile, was something more. Even as the shuttle's engines roared to life, Mira watched the final moments unfold. The Varkun had fought valiantly, but it wasn't enough. Yet, in their final stand, they had made a choice. They had protected them. I'll remember this, Eli said quietly. We don't just survive here. We belong. They were invited. Not summoned, not captured, invited. The message arrived encoded in Elvari fractals, broadcast through the same gravitic pathways they'd hijacked 2 weeks prior atop Mount Roraima. Nia stared at the transmission in silence. Repeat that, Dimitri said, setting down his repair plasma axe with theatrical care. Rajiv adjusted his glasses, blinking at the decoded output. The assembly wants to negotiate. With us. Face to face. On neutral ground. Zoe tilted her head. They're afraid. Afraid we'll weaponize the core? Nia asked. Zoe shook her head. Afraid we already have. The designated meeting site was in orbit, an ancient diplomatic station, once used for trade disputes between assembly species. It had long since fallen into ceremonial disuse, until now. They arrived in a patched-together human shuttle, its engine a Frankenstein blend of alien sublight drives and Earth-made combustion overrides. As they docked, the station's vast docking ring opened like the petals of a dead flower. Nia stepped out first. Flanking her were Dmitri, armed and resolute, and Rajiv, scanning the walls for traps. Zoe walked beside them, her gaze fixed not on the architecture, but the unseen threads that hung beneath it. Inside, the air was heavy with translation overlays. Sounds twisted mid-echo. Voices didn't quite match the mouths that formed them. A Threx representative, 8 feet tall, for iridescent with tension, greeted them with a low, formal bow. Earth, it said, you are now acknowledged. The assembly hall was massive, lined with diplomats and envoys from over 60 species. Most watched with a nervous curiosity reserved for wild predators kept barely chained. A pale Elvari floated toward them, its body barely corporeal, face a shifting mass of mathematical symmetry. You have destabilized 3 quadrants of order, it said to Nia. Human unpredictability poses a threat to galactic equilibrium. You enslaved our planet, she replied. That decision was democratic, the Elvari said. Rajiv scoffed. You mean 63 species voted to chain us because we made you nervous with how fast we learned to punch back? The chamber rippled with subtle discomfort. Even now, they couldn't understand how Earth had adapted so quickly. Turned scrap into weapons, fear into coordination, loss into leverage. Zoe stepped forward. You don't fear our tech. You fear our dreams, our capacity to see beyond the edge and want more. Desire unchecked becomes contagion. The Threx said coldly. That's what freedom is, Zoe answered. A beautiful, dangerous virus. They were offered terms. Amnesty, limited sovereignty, trade inclusion, even a voice in the assembly, conditional on immediate dismantlement of all human-modified alien technology, especially the gravitic core. Nia stared at the offer, then at her team. Zoe, they want us leashed, not heard. Rajiv, we can fake compliance. Delay the deactivation. Stall while we... No, Nia said, we're not lying. We're deciding. Dmitri cracked his knuckles. So what's it going to be? In the silence that followed, Nia stepped forward. We refuse, she said clearly. Not out of spite, not for vengeance, but because you taught us what you fear most, independence. Gasps, murmurs. A few species turned away, unwilling to witness what they thought would come next. Nia continued. You've ruled this galaxy by making every voice sound the same. Earth is a scream, a question, and now you've heard it. She stepped back. The delegation turned and walked away. No guards followed, no weapons fired, because in that moment, every species present realized something they could not unlearn. Earth didn't want to conquer. Earth wanted to compete, and it was already winning. Back aboard their ship, the silence was different. It wasn't caution, it was clarity. What now? Dmitri asked. We build, Nia said. Not for war. For presence. Rajiv nodded. They'll try to undermine us politically. Isolate us. Block trade. Zoe smiled faintly. Let them. We've been alone before. It made us resourceful. Nia activated the NAV interface. Start with Mars. Then Europa. Then out. No more ceilings. Behind them, Earth spun quietly in the dark, scarred, proud, and louder than ever.